Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Isela DeBose, the Executive Director of the Arizona Enlightenment Center, and I thought I would just jump on today. And I want to make sure that I'm on because sometimes I start and then you can't hear me. There's something wrong with the audio. Yep, good. Okay. So I facilitate the Course in Miracles and a Course of Love sessions for the Arizona Enlightenment Center. And one of the things that we talk about so many incredible things, and it's really a sort of a deep reflection of our experience that we are having in physical form and recognizing who we really are. And one of the things that I often talk about is the onion. The onion. Does everyone remember the onion from Shrek? I always think about Donkey talking about that we're all just onions. And it really kind of resonated with me back then and even more now. I think that we are basically these sort of complex beings, but we really don't have to be. And that's the part that I've really been thinking about quite a bit and kind of sitting in that space of being reflective in who I really am in this physical experience in this world that we are all in right now. And if you are a student of A Course in Miracles, you recognize that we are in sort of this illusion, right, that we've created. This is sort of the dream. And in the truth of everything, and truth with a capital T, we are spiritual beings. We are a part of a collective oneness. And we have chosen to have this experience for lots of reasons. And for a very, very, I think, a long time, particularly in the teachings, we talk quite a bit about things happen for us to be able to learn and grow as a soul, right? And then as we've been continued to sort of evolve in that understanding and sort of really come to a deeper knowing and connection to our truest selves, I really question the intent or the purpose of living or learning through the hard way. So in order for us to want love and peace, we have to experience the heavy times, the hard times, it's that whole saying, in order for us to want peace, we have to experience war. And I think that that is a collective decision that we as a consciousness have created. I don't believe that that's something that we have to experience. And I think we're entering upon a time, again, remember, time is of linear experience here in this physical form. But in truth, time doesn't exist. Time collapses. And there is no time or space. And so in this linear experience of time that we are having, time has been intended for our learning, right? It's for our learning, our reflection, our going deep. And this is where the onion comes into play. So I'm going to peel the onion and tell the story of the onion because I think it's an important part of our journey, many of our journey. But I'm coming to a place as a medium who really sits in that space of just trying to allow as opposed to trying to figure out, if that makes sense. So let me kind of go a little bit further in that. We are conditioned to try to figure things out. We are conditioned to make sense of things. We are conditioned because we are told this is how you learn, this is how you grow. We are conditioned to take an experience that we are having and be deeply self-reflective about it and understand how do these connections, where do these connections come together and what am I supposed to learn from this? And I think that there's a reason for that. There's an intended purpose for that. I think the journey is important. But I think there also comes a time when we no longer need to do that because this is gonna send some people over the edge here when I say this. I believe that that's ego. Ego is the one that is intending for us to have the experience as though we are learning and growing at a soul level. And so that's the onion, okay? So I think that all of this stuff on the outside here of the onion, and I even brought a knife to cut it, all this outside of an onion these are the stories that we are told. Okay, these are the stories that we are told that we are. So let me give you an example of this. I specialize in children. So that is my true specialization, is connecting with children. And not just connecting on a spiritual realm, but as a profession, I have worked with children for many, many years. And now I'm a consultant in that area of work. And so this is the story of what the adults say that we are. Okay. We all have had this experience. And if you've been fortunate enough to have chosen parents who you come in going, I am called to be a teacher, that you have parents who say, yay, I celebrate you. I celebrate your desire to be a teacher, and I want you to go and do that. And we're going to do whatever we can to fan the flame, right? To support you in that endeavor. Now, some of us did not have that experience, and maybe some of you wanted to be a singer or an actor or something that was less sort of predictable, right? The unpredictability of it sometimes causes some concern within our families. And they say, no, that's not what you should be. You should be a lawyer. You should do this. Or no, you shouldn't speak out. You need to silence, stay quiet because of these reasons. Or no, it isn't ever okay for the man to stay home and take care of the children. You need to be a man, you need to go out, you need to get a job. And so we have all of these messages that we receive coming into this physical form, right? When the first 6 years in life, which are most formative in terms of how we see the world, we're creating this lens of how we experience the world based on the adults in our lives, the people who care for us, the people who love us, that, and whatever we see creates the lens of our experience. So that's all of this stuff, okay? The outside stuff. Now, many of us continue through the journey of this physical experience. We continue down this path, believing that that's who we are, okay? And it's okay for that. So this is not coming from a place of judgment. This isn't coming from a place of where, you shouldn't be this, you should. It's not that at all. We are exactly where we should be. We are doing exactly as we should, okay? That's the trusting piece of this universal experience that we are having, okay? Nothing wrong with that. But for some of us, that starts to not sit well, okay? This story that we have been told, okay, because there are a couple stories that happen here. The story we tell ourselves, which is often the stories that we were told that we now have adopted and agreed upon, sometimes no longer sits well with us. So we start to go, you know what? I used to think this is what I wanted to do. So teacher is a really good example. I went to school, I got my bachelor's degree, I got my master's degree, but that's not what I want to do anymore. That doesn't sit well with me anymore. And what happens is all this guilt sometimes kind of takes over because I went to school and I'm still paying back loans and all the story, right, that we get stuck in. But still something's very unsettling. Or maybe we're in a marriage that we entered upon when we were younger, and we had this perception of this is what a marriage should look like. And as we continue to move through that experience, we recognize, you know what, I don't feel good. This doesn't feel right to me. I think that there's more to who I am, and I'm not able to express that in this relationship. And so there are lots of things that we enter upon and that we have an experience of, and we allow that to happen even though it doesn't resonate at a deep level. And so some of us, not everyone, but some of us come to a place where we go, you know what, I need to be different, and I'm going to choose to be different. But that in itself is quite an undertaking, especially if you're in relationships or in patterns that are comfortable, even if they're not healthy. Okay, because that will keep us kind of stuck. And I don't mean stuck like forever. I mean, it's a choice that we make, right? And so then what happens is we start to unlayer that. Okay, so we start to peel off all the things that we have been told. I'm going to start to tear up. Where we start to unlayer all of the things that we've been told we're supposed to be, that we've been told what we're supposed to do, right? We start to unlayer those things. Okay, and I will tell you that this is probably the hardest part. It's all hard. All parts are hard if we perceive it as such. But initially we do perceive it as such because it is comfortable to stay in something that's familiar. Okay. Familiarity is what our brain seeks. It seeks patterns. And so even if it's unhealthy, even if it doesn't feel good, even if like intellectually we understand, it's hard to sometimes break out of those very patterns. Okay. So it takes courage. And one of the things that I talk about with children and with everybody is that right here, which is really your heart chakra. Your heart chakra is in the center here. And if you place your hand here on your heart chakra and you inhale and exhale deeply, right? That yoga breath, that deep, take it all the way in, hold for 3 to 7, depending on, what's comfortable to you, and exhale completely and totally, like you are pulling everything that you have out of you. And then you inhale once again, getting oxygen to the brain, moving yourself from what I call the freak out place into a place where you're able to make some decisions. And I'm talking about the brain level at this part. So I'm talking the physical form. And so courage is always available. Courage is right here, kind of the way that it makes sense for me, again, in this physical form. I inhale and I pull courage here so that I can work through what I call walking through the fire. Walk through the fire of what's familiar to me in order for me to release it and to let go of it. And that in recognizing, now I'm going into the spiritual realm. So there's 2 levels, the level of the physical form and then the level of who we really are. Okay. So I dance in between those experiences every day, every moment of every day, because there are things that I have to do when I wake up in the morning. There are things I got to get dressed. There are things that I need to do, right? I've got to work. I've got to, whatever your to-do lists are. That's the physical experience that we have in this world. Now, having said that, I can have the physical experience and I can have all of the emotions that I have within that, but I can still pull back out and recognize who I truly am. And I can not only sit in that space of neutrality, that's what I call it, a space of neutrality, okay? Because the good and the bad doesn't matter. That's judgment. That's judgment, whether things are amazing or things are not so much. When I can learn to stay in that space of neutrality and connect with my highest self, to connect with whatever you call that universal love, whether it's God, whether it's the universe, whether it's your highest self, whatever to you that connection is, I can stay, and that's kind of it's like the goal for me, is to stay in that place of neutrality so that I can be within the world and then step back and find that sense of comfort and safety and love, knowing that I am more than this physical experience. I am more than this body. I am more than Isela, okay? Because Isela is one facet of my overarching soul experience, okay? Just one facet. And to live from that space of detachment allows for me to consciously move between being in this physical experience, right? And doing the things that I need to do. Things are happening in the world, right? I get to have the experience of learning from those things. And again, I really lean into, I believe that that's ego's doing. Okay. And it's okay for it to be ego's doing. That's the thing. We get into this place where we go, ego's bad or ego's a horrible, evil thing. And we don't want that to be a part of our experience. Well, I kind of come from the place of, what if I just sat and had coffee with ego? Like, let me invite ego to have coffee. And let's kind of see the experience we're having as not that it's a war between choosing one or the other. Right? Highest self versus ego. It's not that. It's that we can sit and be allies and I can recognize its place because what I resist persists. So if I continue to push ego or go, oh my God, that's my ego on overdrive and just going, oh, hi there, ego, come on over and let's have some coffee. That what we do is we take the power, the perceived power away from it. Okay. But I really believe, and this is that kind of inside out that I've done a lot of most recently, is that the perception of learning and the perception of growing is still ego in charge. Okay? Because our truest, highest self already knows. And so what this is getting to our highest, truest self. But what we do is we get wrapped up in the egoic experience of unraveling. And I think it serves its purpose. So it's not like it's this horrible thing, but I also don't think we have to go through it to get there. We've just collectively decided that that's how we will get there. Okay? And so let me go back to the onion here. We start to unlayer. All right, we start to unlayer. And so some of these, the unlayering of the onion might be past experiences that we had as children. It might be past life experiences that have sort of threaded into this physical experience that we're having right now. It might be a traumatic experience you had when you were 15. Okay, all of those things. It may even be how we related to our family or the people that were closest to us. So the dance that we created in relationship with one another. Okay, so maybe the pattern that we created is to withhold love when we are frustrated. Maybe the pattern that we created was that we place blame instead of take responsibility for what I did in my part in the situation. Maybe part of the pattern is to hold on to old experiences or to perceive as something that's happening as an attack, that means that I'm not loved. So all of these patterns of behavior have been sort of created, and in terms of our brain, these neurosynaptic connections have come together to create these patterns that we then experience and we try to recreate, because the brain seeks patterns. So we try to recreate these patterns in our life, in the physical experience that we are having. So part of this unlayering of the onion is recognizing that I am not the victim, right? That I can choose at any given moment what to feel. And I caution, I always stop there for a moment. And because there are two parts of this feel what we feel, okay? The first part is that it's important for us, I think, to feel what we feel. And when we feel what we feel, whether it's sadness or frustration or irritation or feeling a sense of loss, even feeling guilt, okay? When we allow that experience to occur and we feel into that, I believe that it loses its power over us, the perception of power over us, okay? So we're no longer the victim of it, rather we're basically riding down the current, the river with it, okay? And once we ride down the current with it and we get to wherever that we're going and the waters are still, we can now stand and quite honestly, thank the experience. You know, that experience allows for me to become more aware of it next time and to recognize with consistency that it does not have power over me. Rather, I get to choose. Okay. So it's important, I think, in this unlayering for us to feel what we feel. But here's the other thing, and this is where it gets really tricky. Sometimes we feel what we feel and we hold on to it because it's comfortable. So that's not in the process of healing, and that's not in the process of letting things be. Okay, I'm holding on to it because the feeling of being a victim, the feeling of withholding love, not talking to someone, the feeling of my perceived understandings of what's happening without looking at it objectively. So I'm looking at it subjectively, which is emotionally. Okay, I feel protected, it's familiar, and I'm going to hold on to that. Okay, so sometimes we get in that place where we stay there and we justify it by telling the story about it. Okay, so that's where we have to become aware, right? That personal awareness, that self-awareness, we have to be aware that are we staying in this feeling because it's familiar and comfortable, or are we riding the wave, allowing it to move through us so that in the end, I'm able to appreciate the experience and recognize next time how to be able to move through gracefully. Okay, I'm hoping that makes sense, because sometimes when I say to sit in the experience, we're sitting in this experience for 2 and 3 years. Okay. And sitting in the experience in 2 or 3 years is when we continue to tell the same story. So we come together, you and I come together, and we're in the same story of who did what and who said what and how that made you feel. Because remember, nobody can make you feel anything without your consent. That's your full power. You have the power to feel what you feel, and you can choose to feel love. You can choose to feel animosity. You have the choice, and only you have the choice, right? Okay. So that's the onion. The peeling of the onion. Now, and again, we all have a different experience. So what is on the layers of your onion is going to be based on your values, your beliefs, and your experiences. And I'm going to throw something in kind of as a side. Whenever you have an experience, okay, so something happens, you see something, immediately we go into a thought about it, okay? That thought or that perception now that we have created can move into a place of judgment or not, okay? So we have complete control over the thought we have about what we are experiencing or what we're perceiving. We have control over that. Now, again, I'm not saying not to have a reaction to what is happening around you, but you can have a reaction and you can still be at complete peace at the same time. Okay, you can do that. All right, so I'm going to cut this onion open and I'm going to try not to cry. Because at the very core here, and the onion has a core, right? And I think that when we get to the inner parts of the onion, the very close to that core, what happens is before then, we seek outside confirmation, validation, and approval. We do. And that comes by way of even healing, seeking out Reiki practitioners, seeking out people like me, seeking information to learn from, books, YouTube videos. We seek out information, and in our journey of unpeeling, okay, that journey of unpeeling all of that, we get confirmation and validation that we're on that journey to healing. We're on that journey to connecting with source. We're on that journey to maybe tapping into our intuition, whatever it is that you see as your goal, right? That movement forward. Okay. And I think when we get to the very closest part of that core, this is where we start to recognize that none of that needed to be so. And this is the part that's very tricky, because we have collectively decided that we are sort of like onions and that we have all of these experiences we need to unlayer. But what if we collectively decided that we didn't need those experiences to learn? What if we came in tapping into the most intuitive part of ourselves, the part within us that already knows? Okay? And this is the part that's really tricky for a lot of us, because we resist what doesn't feel normal, natural, or familiar. Okay? So now I'm going to go back to when we get to that very core. When we get to the very core, we start to recognize that validation, approval, and acknowledgement doesn't come from outside of ourselves. Okay? Because you are perfect in every way. You are perfect in every way. And you have the depth of knowing. You have the depth of truth. You have everything that you need to live peacefully and joyfully, with gratitude, with grace. You have all that. Okay? The key, and I think that's the journey that we have agreed upon collectively to I'd say endure, to get through, to move past, that when we get to there, we have to shift out, and even before then, seeking outside ourselves. This is where getting quiet, this is where meditation, this is where we stop, and this is going to go against everything that we have probably been we've all been trained to do. We need to stop thinking about shit. We need to stop trying to process why this happened, when, and how. We've got to stop doing that. When we can go in within without judgment, and that's that important practice of not judging, self-judging or judging of others. That when we practice the process of being open-hearted, which means I see something, boom, thought happens. My job is to pull away, to recognize that thought. And what I say to myself is cancel that thought, or I go, I wonder what is happening over there. I wonder what information I do not have. So that it pulls me out the state of judgment. Okay? And so that happens. And my job is to be in the most present experience in this physical form. Because in the most present experience is the only space and time, because we are in that linear experience that we are having. It's the only space and time that I can connect to my highest self, to universe, to God, to whatever you call that greater energy, that collective energy. Okay? That's the only space, is the here and the now, that I can make that connection. And so whenever anything happens, it's pulling myself back in and going inward without judgment, coming from a place of love, extending love, okay, and being love. So back to the onion. At this very core level, you are completely perfect. You don't need approval, acceptance, and validation from the outside. That is all generated from inside ourselves, because it is limitless. It is there and always has been there. And we can access that strength, that knowing, that being at any time, because we are in time, right? In this experience. Something happens, fear shoots up for you, allow for that experience to happen, recognize why it showed up, thank it for showing up, and then come back to that place of neutrality. I am safe. I am more than this physical experience that I am having. I am more than Isela, because Isela is only one facet of who I really am. Just one small little facet. And once I'm done with this, it's going to be one little part. So I am more than that. So you come to that place of neutrality and you can feel the peace and love. And this just takes practice. That's all it is it takes practice of allowing without trying to interpret, without trying to be in charge. Because I think not in part, we are trained to try to control every experience of our life. We're trained to do that. We are trained to write goals. We are trained to, what's going to happen first and then second. We are trained to perceive ourselves in the driver's seat of the car. And when I say this, it's very tricky for me, because I'm not telling anybody to do nothing, to lay on the couch and do nothing. That's not what I'm saying. And if you've ever read The Surrender, I believe it's The Surrender Project. I think that's what the name of it is. There's 2 books, and now I'm complete blank. I talk about these books all the time. But it is really resting in that space of peace and love. So it's not resting in the space of uncertainty, doubt, and fear. It's not in that. Because if you do that and lay on the couch, you're going to continue to have those experiences that present itself that validate what you are projecting out. Okay? Because your projection of your outside world is basically what you are creating within your mind. Okay? So your projection of what's happening around you has been created by you. And so I'm not saying be a schlump on the couch. What I am saying is that when we start to acknowledge, to get to this very core, that you are not in the driver's seat, that you are actually in the passenger seat of the car. That, and for me, I work with angels. I work with angels and all of the modalities and all of the techniques and strategies that we use, I think are helpful to us because we believe them to be so. Okay? But in truth, with a capital T, they are simply tools that we use. but in truth, we don't need any of them. And the angels and our guides and all of the energies that we pull towards us are of the same collective oneness. So however that shows up for you, whether that's Buddhist monks, whether that's angels, whether that's, EDs come through for you, whatever that means for you, that's true for you, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So for me, I work with angels, and so I see angels or my guides in the driver's seat of the car. And I have had so many times, because I work with children who have been abused and abandoned. That was my professional career for a very long time, and I felt this need to change the world. I mean, really, like, I'm going to do these things to make a difference in the world, and I'm going to change the world in this way. It's one child at a time, one family at a time. I'm going to change the world. And a very clear message that has come to me over and over again is that you don't need to do that, Isela. You don't need to do that. We, as the collective we, are doing that. Your job is to be you and do you, basically. Your job is to be that which you want to see in the world. I think Gandhi said that. Yeah. That be that which you want to see in the world with every action, every interaction, everything that we do. And what happens is within those experiences, the miracles occur. And when the miracle happens between you and I, the miracle happens for everyone. That's kind of how energy works. And so my job is to show up at my truest, highest self, where I am able to be love in everything I do and everything I say. And in those experiences, I create a ripple. I create the experience. Okay? But again, and a little side thing there too, because we are conditioned, and I keep saying this because it's a really big deal, particularly with women. We are conditioned to seek approval. We are conditioned to seek acknowledgement. We're conditioned to seek outside ourselves for our worthiness. And we don't need that. And the moment we start to not rely on others, now it doesn't mean that gives us permission to be unkind. It doesn't mean that because when we're sitting in the space of love, then the thought of being unkind intentionally doesn't even filter through our mind. Okay? Because we're being the expression of love. So when we are in that space, we don't have expectations for anything in return. That's huge. Because again, we are conditioned that when I give, I receive. Okay? Now you will receive, but it has to come from a place of no expectation. That we are the expressions of love, and we are simply being that. Because then collectively we create a higher vibration, right? And then we start to then see things happen, sort of in this space of miracles. Now, I want to say something about that. I want to go because I'm already at 33 minutes. We limit ourselves. We limit what can happen universally at a greater, in that greater consciousness. We limit miracles because our brain wants to make sense of things. And it's Neville Goddard, who I'm a big fan of. If you've not read his books, I think he published books in the early 1900s. I'm rereading his books right now just because I'm using it in a series of books that I'm writing. But he talks about the imagination being the gateway to truth, the gateway to knowing. And so what I encourage you to do is to watch what you are labeling, watch what you're giving a name to, and how you're trying to make sense of it in your mind. Because these limitations, these labels we give to things, limit the miracles that can show up for us. So imagination, that's what Einstein too says, right? Imagination is greater than knowledge. It's something like that. And I think he was tapped in intuitively big time. I think when we practice the process of allowing, which means that you're not in the driver's seat of things, and you can let yourself imagine having conversations with your ego. Imagine, even if you don't feel connected intuitively, you are, but you don't feel connected intuitively. Imagine yourself having coffee or a conversation with whoever you are connected with. So whether it's an archangel, your guides, someone who's crossed over, someone close to you. Imagine yourself, not just talk to them. Imagine yourself engaging in a lunch with one another. Step into the realm of imagination. The more we can practice the process of imagination, the more we start to release the constructs that keep us from experiencing these really miraculous experiences that are within our fingertips, that are right here. But because we want to make sense of everything, we want to give a label to everything, we limit those experiences. So I hope that that's helpful. Hi, Marianne. I miss you too. So I hope that that was helpful to those of you who are watching. You're not here just because, we don't just show up just to show up. If you showed up, there's a reason why you and I have come together today. So I hope that you are well. I wish you love. I wish you well. I'm going to post this onto YouTube. I'm looking to do another Friday night readings. I just have some stuff going on right now in terms of work. So my head is kind of wrapped around that. And then once that passes, then I will start pushing out more videos and stuff. So remember the onion, okay? Where are you in the layers of the onion? And don't judge that. So if you've been on this self-help, spiritual, metaphysical, whatever you call it, journey for 25 years, and you're like, dang it, I'm still feeling this, or I'm still feeling guilty, or I'm still reacting in situations, or I'm still withholding love, just look at it as a pattern. That's it, just a pattern. And I say that intentionally. It's just a pattern that I've created in my brain, and just a pattern can be changed. It just means that I need to be more intentional. I need to put forth a consistent effort, and I need to recognize that I am not alone. I've never been alone, and that I can seek not only the support and the guidance, but I can seek someone else to drive. It's like that whole Jesus take the wheel, right? But I can request someone else to drive, and when I do that, and I'm telling you just from my own personal experience, when you allow yourself to not feel like you have to be the one that's in control, or that you really will start to see how things just kind of magically happen in your experience of life. So anyhow, let me see if I have any comments. Nope, I don't. All right, so I wish you all love. I wish you all well, and we'll stay connected.